Here we are in midwinter, and it's nice to remember the summer months. This last summer I spent a considerable amount of time among the medieval churches of Norfolk in eastern England, a county rich in church architecture and very dear to my heart. Among the places I visited again this year was Oxborough Church in western Norfolk, and here I am. This was once one of the grandest churches in the whole county, but you will notice that there is something odd about it now. The nave of the church is now unroofed and in ruins, and has been for the past 70 years. So what happened? Well, in 1877 the church spire, which rose 150 feet into the sky, was struck by lightning, and it and the tower that supported it were rebuilt. The work was completed in 1879. Sadly, the Victorian builders didn't do a particularly good job of it, and on the 28th of April 1948, in the middle of the morning, it was a windy day, people in the village heard a loud crack, and the tower opened up and the spire fell into the tower. The tower then collapsed into the nave, taking down the nave roof and the south nave arcade. It was pretty disastrous. Rather than rebuilding the church, the nave was left roofless, the windows taken out, and the interior laid to grass. I think it's a rather charming solution to such a disastrous situation. Thankfully, the collapse didn't affect the chancel and the South Chancel Chapel, for these are where the great treasures of this building are to be found, as we will see. The chancel is now the parish church and is a light and airy 15th century space lit by a large perpendicular window, and it gives just a hint of the former splendour of this church building before the 1948 collapse. The chancel contains a very special lectern, a brass 15th century eagle-shaped gospel lectern that has an inscription on it recording that it was given to the church by Thomas Kipping, who was the rector of the neighbouring poor parish of Narborough. Kipping in fact lived in Oxborough, where he had a much more lucrative role and accommodation as a chantry priest of Sparrows Chantry, founded in 1483. I have a blog post on my website all about this lectern and the history of the man who gave it. Such objects in churches do tend to take us down rabbit holes. The sedilia, the seating that would have been used by Kipping and his fellow clergy to sit during Mass, survives on the south side of the altar. Then, as I pan round, you can see something rather wonderful coming into view. This is one side of a monument that is in the South Chapel, the Bedingfield Chapel. So let's go and take a look at that. The Bedingfield family, or as they have been since they married the heiress of the distinguished Norfolk family, the Pastons, in the 18th century, the Paston Bedingfields, still live in the village, in Oxborough Hall, next door to the church, which is now a National Trust property. They have been here since 1462, when Margaret Bedingfield, the wife of Sir Edmund Bedingfield of Suffolk, inherited the properties, including Oxborough, of her brother Sir Thomas Tuddenham, who had had his head chopped off in 1462 for plotting against King Edward IV. When she died in 1474, the property then passed to her grandson Sir Edmund Bedingfield, and he constructed Oxborough Hall in the 1480s, a wonderful example of early brickwork. Sir Edmund married twice and died in 1496 and was then buried in Oxborough Church. His second wife, Margaret Scott, survived him, dying in 1514, and in her will of 1513 she asked to be buried in a new chapel planned but not yet constructed on the south side of the chancel of Oxborough Church. And that chapel is this space, the Bedingfield Chapel. The chapel has a number of monuments to the family dating from the 16th and 17th century, but it is dominated by two spectacular monuments made of an unusual material, terracotta, cast terracotta, and they are among some of the most impressive examples of work in this medium from Tudor England. And stylistically, they must be of the 1520s or 1530s. The first of these monuments, this one between the chapel and the chancel, is most probably, though we cannot be certain as there are no inscriptions, the tomb of Sir Edmund and his wife Margaret Scott, the founders, if you like, of the chapel. This particular position for a monument is the prime spot, the place of honour, close to where the sacrament would have been reserved above the high altar. The second monument in the western part of the chapel, which forms a sort of screen that originally screened off the chapel from the south nave aisle of the church, is probably that of their first son Sir Thomas, who died in 1538, or their second son Sir Edmund Bedingfield, who died in 1553. Now I favour Sir Edmund Bedingfield, who died in 1553, as the commissioner and perhaps the occupant of this second tomb. Firstly, we know that he was buried in this chapel, as in his will his son Sir Henry Bedingfield asked to be buried close to him. Secondly, there's another piece of evidence that makes Sir Edmund the likely patron of the work. Sir Edmund was married to a woman called Grace Marney. She was the daughter of Henry the First Lord Marney of Layer Marney Towers in Essex. Now, if you go into Layer Marney Church, next to the impressive remains of Lord Marney's brick house, there you will find the tomb of Lord Marney, who died in 1523, and it is made of terracotta just like the monuments here at Oxborough, and with the same motifs that indicate that the work is by the same craftsman. So it makes sense if, while the Marney family were commissioning the tomb of Lord Marney in the late 1520s, their kinsmen Edmund and Grace Bedingfield commissioned these tombs here at Oxborough simultaneously. As I say, without any identifying inscriptions, we will never know for sure. The tombs really are a very fine example of terracotta work, and they are wholly in the Italian Renaissance stylistic idiom, the height of fashion in the 1520s and 30s. All, of course, cast in moulds and then fired. The architectural elements are classical, and the decoration consists of cast panels with flowering pots, tumbling urns, and a veritable phalanx of putty gracing the upper portions of both monuments. They really are splendid. I have about 30 copies of the December issue of the Antire Magazine available. For those in the UK, I'm doing my last posting on Monday, so there is still time to grab one before Christmas. For those overseas, you can still get one too, but it will arrive later in December. When this issue arrived from the printer, my wife Claire said it looked like a 28-page Christmas card. It is very colourful this time and full of Christmas-related goodies. There are articles and images of the Nativity and art, Christmas through the diary entries of a Georgian parson, and the history of punch, the robust historical version of the modern mulled wine. If you enjoyed learning about Christmas through the ages, do pick up a copy from the website. You can also pick up gift subscriptions now too, so look out for them on the website shop. I'm sure the Antire would make a fabulous Christmas present for anyone who loves history. May I wish you and your families a very happy Christmas when it comes.